This PSA was brought to you by the Peter G Show.
You may have second thoughts after the show.
Don't drink the foster.
We're really talented. We should get Oscars.
Just pick out a car, for Christ's sake.
No, my name is Peter.
Yeah, I want.
Here's good.
Yeah.
Madam Perry.
I need to get back in the genie bottle.
Louis from Pennsylvania, you're on. He likes it. It's showtime. Peter G Show. Peter G Show. Divorced dad, single dad. Divorced dad, single dad. Peter G Show. That's right, it's showtime Wednesday, and I'm excited. Hope everybody's doing good. How the hell is everybody? Tell me you don't love that daylight savings time. Come on. Let's see a show of hands. Come on. I think it makes everybody happy. Just that little bit, that stretch. Let me do something a little longer in the daylight. Let me start a little later. Go into the night. That's me. I'm a night owl anyway. Hope everybody's doing well. We got a great show for you tonight. I am excited because it's a plethora of information and really good information, life stuff. And tonight I'm glad that I have Dr. Doug Bremner on the show, psychiatrist. Where's my guard? Researcher, writer, professor at Emory University, expert in PTSD, and drug safety advocate. The list goes on and on. He's pretty well versed, and we're going to be talking to him. And he's got a couple of books. And I honestly, this needs to be a 4-hour show because he's got 9 million chapters and every chapter is about something pretty need to know. But we're going to do the best we can, and we could always have him back. But I finally got around to getting him on the show. It's only taken almost 2 years, but better late than never. And that's who's coming on in just a few minutes. Also, I want you to know, I've been waiting for this one too. I'm telling you, a lot of stuff going to go on this year. A lot of stuff. Next week, just so I want you to mark this on your calendar, all right? Just, I always give, that way you make plans. You go, oh, I forgot, I didn't know. Mark it. March 20th, Tim Kramer, founder of Mosaic Advertising and a conservative show host of the Kramer Says podcast. This guy is he lets it all out. He doesn't hold back on anything. And he's very knowledgeable. And he may even hurt some people's feelings, because you may disagree what he's got to say. But at least he says it. And I hope that you'll tune in to take what he has to say in consideration and just keep it in the back of your head. That's all. It's called, opinions and facts and truths. And, you decide. But Tim Kramer, I'm looking forward to it because when I said on these upcoming shows, buckle up, I meant it. Buckle up. It's one of those years. So Tim Kramer from Kramer Says, podcaster. And I promise you, it's gonna. I'm looking forward to it. I don't know what's gonna happen. If they don't ban me on this one, I'll keep moving forward. Not that there's anything bad about it, but again, they have selective likings. Who has selective likings? Oh, these guys right here. Yeah, they like to. They're still going through all my stuff and taking things down from years ago. But either way, I digress. All right. And lastly, don't forget, please, I love that you watch the show, but please, please, please support. All right. Subscribe, follow, share. YouTube's, Facebook's pretty big. A lot of people on there like it. YouTube, again, they're screwing with me. How can you love or hate something if you don't know it's there? But go there and hit the subscribe button. And for those of you who are super busy but still want to pay attention to what's going on the Peter G Show, you're in the car driving, you're at work, you can put an earbud in your ear, Google Peter G Show podcast. Put an earbud in your ear and just listen to the audio version. I love when you can watch the video version, but the audio version is the next best thing to being here. So please, let's show them that we're not slowing down and we're not backing down. So, and I love that you do it. So thank you. And I get a lot of responses and stuff like that. So anyway, so that's what's going on for the tonight and the future. And right now, before we get started, we're going to just take a minute because, of course, we need to hear from my good friends over at Clean Star Products with their DX1 driver fuel additive, money-saving fuel additive. And we'll be right back.
Let us help you with the high price of fuel. Hello, I'm Ty Thompson at CleanStarProducts.com. We can optimize your engine, saving you money and gas. Here's how. Our program works the same with gasoline and diesel engines. Whether you're using a car pack or SUV pack, the instructions are the same. Add 1 bottle to your engine oil, and each time you change your oil, add 1 bottle to the fuel tank each and every fuel fill-up. It's that easy. You get 10% fuel economy on average, lower emissions, and increased horsepower. DX1 sells for $2 an ounce, so for just a few dollars a fuel tank, you can optimize your engine, saving you money and gas. Come on, give it a try. It's the finest green grade oil in the world from a California environmental company. You're gonna feel it when you drive. Order online today, we'll get it out right away. CleanStarProducts.com/shop.
That's right, folks. Clean Star Products. And listen, I'm going to tell you personal experience. They actually have a product that works. I have a high mileage pickup truck that I love. Won't get rid of it because they don't make them like they used to. And I started putting this in there, and it's a pig. I mean, it's heavy. It drinks a lot of gas, V8, but I love it. And I put it in this vehicle, and within 2 tanks, I just know that I don't have to step on the gas as hard to get it to go as to pick up like it did when I put my foot more in the gas. Again, it cleans out the engine, cleans out the fuel injectors, and it just brings your car back to life, gives it that extra added horsepower. Take care of your body, and your body will take care of you. Call them. Go to www.cleanstarproducts.com. Call them. They will talk to you personally if you have questions. And if you want to order, here's what you do. Tell them you want to order, and you saw it on the Peter G Show. And you can order 4 bottles, but you will get 5 for the price of 4 if you tell them you saw it on the Peter G Show. All right? They're dedicated. They have a clean green product, and it works. That's all I can say. Little bitty bottles. And once you get it in your system of your car and you start working that car, you can back off on it and just maintenance at that point. But I swear by it. I'm not just telling you this. Again, it shocked me because I don't believe in a lot of stuff, but they got something that works. Call them. Ty is a great guy, and he believes in what he has and does, and he'll take care of you. CleanStarProducts.com. All right. Now, before I bring Doug in, anybody recognize this? You know, how many people have these sitting on their kitchen counters in their bathrooms and so that? Pharmaceutical drugs. We live and die by them. I have a guy who is well-versed coming on in a matter of seconds, and we're going to talk about pharmaceutical drugs. He's a PTSD expert, which I think is a big thing, a big topic. A lot of people suffering from it. He's a VA doctor, psychiatrist, writer. He's written, these are just 2. He's got several books. I'll read the list. But these are, I was reading this stuff, and it's endless of good information. So without further ado, where are we? I want to introduce, he's been on the show actually almost 2 years ago with his sister. They co-wrote a book on true crime. So he's multifaceted. He's I mean, you might not catch him cutting people's grass, but the thing is, when it comes to knowledge, this is your man. So ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, from Atlanta, Georgia, professor at Emory University, doctor, psychiatrist, writer, researcher, speaker, Mr. Doug Bremner. Yay. How you doing,
Thanks,
Doug?
Peter. Yeah, thanks for having me on.
Or if I say doctor.
Yeah.
I wasn't calling you doctor when you were on with your sister because you were writing you were just a writer on that book, not just a writer, but I mean, it wasn't about your occupation.
Well, I mean, when it comes to writing, I don't like we actually kind of made a mistake for that book, I think, by first it was Ann Bremner, JD, and Doug Bremner. And I said, well, what about me? I have a degree too. But I think it makes it more complicated to throw that MD in there for writing books.
The book did well. It was a great book. You
Yeah.
know, I mean, there's a lot of people who are into true crime and all that. It's a huge audience. And I'm finding out as I, because I've had a couple of other people that dive into that whole scenario in the past. And so, you did what you did. But I mean, you have, you have a ton of books. And I just want to go down and then I'm going to ask you a question real quick. You have, does stress damage the brain? You have fastest growing religion on earth. Before you take that pill, all these sentences I'm saying are titles of books. Descendants in America, Descendants in America, right? Laughing Cow books?
Yeah.
Okay. The Goose That Laid the Golden Egg. Now, these aren't children's, rhymes or anything like that, but these are your clever ploys on what's going on. And then you have The Justice in the Age of Judgment. That's what we did. The Moon That Had No Compassion for the Dead, and other poems. I mean, then you got these two that came out since the time I saw you, and I got to tell you, the Pimps, Whores, and Chiggers, that really caught my attention. But we'll get into that. What I want you to do first, I want you to just give everybody a synopsis on who you are, what you do, and why you're doing what you do, and then we'll pick it up from there.
Well, thanks a lot, Peter. So I am a psychiatrist and professor, and I've done research in post-traumatic stress disorder and memory and other things that might be relevant to the true crime world. I've written, throughout my career. I've always enjoyed writing, and when I was in college, they said, well, why don't you go to medical school and then you can write at night? And that's pretty much what I do. So I write at night. And one of the things I like to do is I like to take complicated information and make it easy, understandable for the layperson. And I think that's important to do. And I started doing that with the stress field in post-traumatic stress disorder. Does stress damage the brain? And after I finished that book, I said, well, now I want to, and that was in what they call the professional category, which meant that it was written for psychologists and therapists. I said, well, now I'd like to write a book that the average trauma patient could read and benefit from. And they said, well, that's like what we call a trade book. And we don't do those books at this publishing house. So I went looking for an agent and shopped a book for patients around, and they said, well, we're not really interested in that because it was soon after 9/11. And I started talking about medication safety, and I was an expert on a medication for acne called Accutane, and it's how it was causing suicides in teenagers. And they said, well, why don't you write a book about medications in general? So that led to Before You Take That Pill, Why the Drug Industry May Be Bad for Your Health, Risks and Side Effects You Won't Find on the Labels of Commonly Prescribed Medications, Vitamins, and Supplements. And that came out with Penguin, which is, a big publisher. And, a lot of people read that book and I think benefited from it. Some people said that they read something in that book that helped them from a dangerous, life-threatening side effect. And so after I wrote that book, I started blogging about medication safety and about pharmaceutical companies and some of the conflicts of interest between pharmaceutical companies and academia. And I put that together in these last two books that I had come out, The Pimps, Whores, and Chiggers and The Pills, Shills, and Psychiatry Wars.
Yeah. Well, which again, it took a while, but once I started on one thing, I just want to explain to everybody that these books, he's right. They're very easy read books. And you have, and we're going to start with the first one, and it's not. You have 71 chapters, so-called chapters in this book, which are basically, in my opinion, topics. And you hit lots of these subjects from a certain type of drug, and you explain the ups and downs of these drugs. And it's a really simple, easy read and really kind of informative. But first of all, what made you, how did you come up with this? Because this really I'm this kind of guy who would write something like this, and you seem really conserved and all that. And I'm going, wow, that's a hell of a title. What happened?
Well, actually, you you can use advertise. You can promote your books through paid advertising on Amazon, and Amazon didn't want to promote that book because they said someone was offended by the title.
Yeah.
But
Perfect.
the pimps are the pimps and whores part refers to the pharmaceutical industry and how some people, so especially back when I wrote Before You Take That Pill, I'm in the academic research and academic medicine world, and I see things sort of firsthand. I used to, give speeches that were paid by drug companies, and at a certain point, they stopped asking me to do that. But there's a lot of money changing hands, and so a lot of people will promote medications, after they've been paid as a consultant or as a special speaker, and they think in their mind that they're not promoting it, but in fact they really are. And research studies show that when doctors that are academic doctors get payments from drug companies, they tend to promote the drug that was made by that company, and they downgrade the potential side effects. So that's the pimps part. People who are promoting drugs. Whore would mean someone who is taking money and promoting the particular medication. And then the triggers part was just, I was writing at the time I was writing for the Huffington Post, and I thought it would be a lot of the posts that I wrote were for that, and so I went back for this book and brought those posts back and kind of added more photographs and kind of updated them with what I feel today. What are the risks and benefits of particular medications? And I started writing about pine straw. So one of the posts was called "Where do they come up with all those goofy names for prescription medications in the first place?" So the post was, I was spreading pine straw around my home in Atlanta, Georgia, and I started to think about what else. Where do they come up with these silly names for medications? Like Trilofan is an antipsychotic, so it sounds like trilafin. So, like you're telling people that suffer from psychosis, well, why don't you just trilafin? Or Singulair would be is a drug for asthma, which is kind of like, or Ceravent is another one. So you're serene while you're ventilating, and I said that some of the people that were reported to have died clutching their inhalers weren't very serene at the time that they were using the inhaler. So after I wrote that post about pine straw, people in the comments started writing about pine straw and growing up in South Georgia and chiggers. And then there's a whole discussion about chiggers, which are these little insects in Georgia that get underneath your skin, and that you can get them if you are just walking through the forest and picking up pine straw. So that's where the chiggers part came in.
So that's a hell of a combination. I mean, all of a sudden, okay, we're going for. I can understand the pimps and horrors of the pharmaceutical industry, but then we go to chiggers. It's like, are these the people that get under your skin?
Maybe in a way, yeah, like another second double entendre.
Here's the thing: you have, again, 71 chapters in this first book, which are basically different topics and analogies and information. I would like to try to see if I could blow through a dozen of them at least and get a quick response out of you as to the chapter, because again, I could hell, we got 2 books, and I had to just I want people to understand about because we go to the doctor, you trust the doctor, and the doctor writes you a prescription for everything. And I just saw this joke just recently that it's a doctor, the doctor says, because of your lifestyle, you need to start taking, these. And the person says, well, should I change my lifestyle? And he says, oh, no, you can continue with your lifestyle. Just keep taking these, and basically it's like there's a pill for everything. And is it not necessarily the solution? So I got really interested when I was going through this, and I tried to narrow it down to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, I don't know. There's a bunch of them. We'll get through some because I do want to touch on your psychiatric portion of your life and the vets that you take care of and the PTSD and all that, because I think that's really important as well in how they do and what you do with them. But I was looking at something. Researchers, chapter 9, researchers trumpet alcohol link to breast cancer. I mean, how do you come up with this, and where do you find it, and true, false, all this stuff?
Well, what I try and do, Peter, is when there's something that comes out in the news media, I try and go and read the the original article in the literature because I have the training and experience that I can do that and sort of try and separate the wheat from the chaff. And what I was seeing is that there were some news releases that were saying basically any amount of alcohol consumption is going to be negative for your health. And so I sort of, pried into that a little bit. And originally, when I was writing this, online. By the way, what happened at a certain point is that I think someone hacked into my blog and maybe someone that wasn't happy with what I was writing about. And so all the posts got destroyed. And that was about 10 years ago. And then I said, well, I was getting so much flack from people getting upset about stuff that I was writing that I decided, well, let's just leave it be. But then I thought, well, a lot of that stuff was pretty good, and it'd be good to go back and see what's new in the literature since then and update it. And that's what happened with the alcohol story. And my conclusion was that, maybe this is a little bit of a backlash because you remember maybe a few years ago, there were some people that were advocates of the wine industry who were saying that drinking red wine in moderate amounts is good for your health. And then that came into question whether there really was a cardiovascular benefit. And there's a chemical that was being promoted by Dr. Oz. I think it's resveratrol, I think it was called. And there's a chemical in red wine that had beneficial cardiovascular effects. But you have to drink about, 20 glasses of wine to get the amount of that chemical that would be beneficial. And then, of course, there's all the negative aspects. But
I believe in that. I believe in that, and I'm working on that. I do believe that the red wine, so I try to drink my 20 glasses a day.
Yeah, me too. But I think that and then this most recent wave of publicity that any amount can be harmful. I think when I went and looked at that, it didn't really cut true to me. That what we consider moderate amounts of alcohol consumption are necessarily bad for your health, because they were including amounts that many people would say are closer to above moderate consumption. So I kind of delved down into the details of that and trying to illustrate, exactly what I'm talking about. They were getting some differences that were really fairly marginal, in my opinion.
I got you. The thing is, you have tons of medications that you talk about, and I can't get to all of them. And they're all really interesting medications that tons of people use. That's why you talk about them. But I'm just going to touch on it. It's like, let them eat Ritalin. Now, Ritalin was a drug used for children a lot. I remember back in the 80s. I remember that. And Ritalin was easily prescribed to all kinds of kids who were just bouncing off the walls, correct?
Yeah, well, I prescribe, actually, when I originally wrote that, I was doing more nuclear medicine. I do a lot more. I'm doing more psychiatry now than I was back then. And I actually, I prescribe Ritalin and Adderall. We use it a lot for PTSD, actually, because there's a lot of problems with attention in PTSD. So, when I wrote that, actually, my son has ADD, and I was sort of struggling with trying to not use medication and using a lot of the, trying some of the behavioral techniques of trying to help him in school and whatnot. And so our pediatrician was, kind of advocating for Ritalin, and he's used it sometimes. He doesn't use it every day. And just, when he has something that requires quite a bit of concentration. But, some of the downsides of Ritalin is it can inhibit growth. And it can have they can promote anxiety and increase heart rate and blood pressure as well.
Wow. See, again, there's I want to get to so many of these, because every single drug you mention on here, and there's a lot of them, is to me is very important. But the thing is, you really want to, what I feel that you really want to bring out is the people behind it. And you have a chapter here that says private insurance companies abuses associated with Bush's Medicare drug benefit program are not a surprise. So it's the whole, insurance companies and this and that. Tell everybody a little bit about that.
Well, anytime you're going to get, large amounts of money, you're going to have potential abuses. So, one of the things that happened with Medicare Part D, which is, Medicare Part D was an expansion in Medicare that allowed people to get prescription medications that are over the age of 65 covered by Medicare insurance. The problem with that is when Bush introduced that, he made this deal with the drug companies that they wouldn't negotiate the price of medication, which is absolutely insane. I mean, some of these medications cost $10,000 a year, and we spend twice as much for medication as any other country in the world. And the drug companies argue that they need that money to do research and development, but they're selling the same drugs in different countries for half as much. And why should Americans pay for all their research and development that is going to benefit the rest of the world? If you look at it like with Wegovy, which is the new weight loss drug, that's like going to imperil the entire Medicare program. It's like $12,000 a year.
It seems like this has been the ongoing argument every year throughout in our country. I mean, constantly the high cost of medications, as long as I can remember.
Yeah, and it's a potential threat to the economy. I mean, the weight loss drugs, the injectable drugs like Wegovy and the others similar to it, they cost $12,000 a year, and there's millions of people in this country that qualify as obese, and it's basically approved for anyone with type 2 diabetes, which is large numbers of people in this country. So my wife and I walked into a medical conference, or my wife walked into a medical conference. She's also a doctor, and they had a doctor up on the stage in front of a group of, this is the American Heart Association, in front of a group of other doctors. They're presenting it like it was an Elton John concert or something. They have, they're putting millions of dollars into the production value of this speech, and it's like a big commercial or something. And
right,
they're saying this is a revolutionary change in treatment.
You have chapter 26. The hospitals are killing us, but now the schools too. That's kind of deep. What's that all about?
I don't remember what that was. That was about. I forgot.
Okay. No, it's okay. I didn't prep you on any of this, so I'm just throwing it at you. And you got a lot of the hospital. It's just that the hospitals are killing us, but now the schools are too. And and to me, it's like I've just learned ever since all this COVID stuff started, which gets me banned, so I don't really want to talk about it. But I question everything now. I question what the doctors are giving people because they're just following orders. I don't even think that they're being. A lot of doctors are just kind of taking, the word of the rep. It's like, here, this stuff does this stuff does this. If they have this problem, just give them this, and they're going okay. And then you got some doctors that are really looking into it and figuring out if it's good or bad. But so you don't know what they're doing. They're just following procedure, and I just think that's kind of dangerous nowadays. But that's just my opinion.
Well, one of the chapters that I wrote about was the cheerleaders that were hired as drug representatives, and so they're basically hiring people based on their attractiveness and social skills rather than being someone that has expertise in a particular medication.
I always thought that it was pretty attractive women wheeling their little wheelie briefcases into doctors' offices, pushing with whatever they were selling. I'm trying to get, because I know that before you know it, we'll be done. Our healthcare system sucks. That's not too hard to understand, but please explain.
Well, our statistics like mortality, we're second to last in the industrialized world. Major industrialized countries, and we spend twice as much money as any other country on earth for healthcare and for prescription medication. So, and if you go and talk to doctors that are on the front line, they're demoralized. They feel like they're not able to give patients the best care that they can. There's all these sort of crazy disincentives and whatnot, and it's sort of a multi-headed beast. It's my own personal opinion is I just think that I think that we kind of went down the wrong road and put too much profit motive into healthcare. I think you run into trouble when you introduce profit motive into people's health.
There's a lot of red tape, I think, in being a doctor nowadays, the business aspect of it. I mean, my parents had a physician who wasn't that old, who left being a doctor and opened up a brewery with his son, because he just got tired of the what it took for him to do his job. And I just think that's kind of sad when they go, you know what, this is more of a pain in the ass than what I can do. They won't let me do what I want to do. And I think they're just making it harder and harder for people, just like, anything else. They're just making it harder for you to want to have the desire to help people.
Yeah. And a lot of physicians are getting burned out by the electronic medical record. So it's like, if they can add more stuff to the electronic medical record in order to sort of cover their rear, they will, and they don't think about the burden that's being imposed, on the doctors. And then all the, they're just sort of getting swamped with messages and emails and stuff that they end up answering late into the night, because it's just sort of overwhelming. And there's a shortage, like the clinic where I work, they're down 16 psychiatrists, and it's not really getting any better. A lot of them are nearing retirement. And there's the same problem with nursing. I mean, the hospital where I work, with the pandemic, they couldn't fill the nursing positions. And so they had to get these locum tenens nurses that cost twice as much. And it just financially has driven some of these hospitals close to the brink. The other thing they're doing is they're closing hospitals in rural areas and in underserved areas. They closed the Atlanta Medical Center, which is in downtown Atlanta, was serving a large area of South Atlanta, and there's just nothing to replace it.
Wow. I hear a lot about, people that are on statins. And lately I've been hearing that statins really aren't what it's not as necessary, or they're not doing what they're supposed to do. You have many chapters dedicated to statins. Do statins make you stupid? Just what's going on with statins? Because I'm sure that many people are on that stuff.
Yeah, well, I'm actually on a statin now because my cholesterol was very high. But what I wanted to point out was, when I first wrote about statins, is that there is a sort of a perversion of information where the positive studies were kind of overemphasized, the side effects were downgraded, and many studies that weren't positive were not emphasized. And one of the things that I pointed out originally was that for women who have elevated cholesterol with no risk factors for heart disease, there's not really good evidence that they're going to reduce your risk of death from cardiovascular disease. And I tried to update that. I still think that there's not any evidence of benefit for statins for women without, history of heart disease or without risk factors is pretty weak. So what you see in medicine again and again is that there'll be a number, there'll be cholesterol or bone mineral density. That's another one I read a lot about. And the medications are made to treat the number, and they're sort of playing on the anxiety of people that say, well, my cholesterol is high, it might kill me, or my bone mineral density is low. And so we're treating the number, but what we're not asking the question, does it actually reduce your risk of death from cardiovascular disease? Does it actually reduce your risk of a fracture that could be disabling? And the answer is not always yes.
Isn't that the whole point, though, why you're taking it? It's supposed to reduce all that?
Yeah, it's supposed to, but there's been this marketing push where the drug marketing people were going around saying, look at a fifth of the population has an elevated cholesterol, and again with statins, we have twice as many people on statins as other countries like Australia or New Zealand. And one of the things that has happened is that they have these medical guidelines. They'll have a group of doctors get together to write guidelines, and a lot of times these meetings are sponsored by the pharmaceutical industry, and they come up with these guidelines, and then you feel like if you're not following the guideline, then you could get sued for malpractice or something. So it's very corrosive practice.
Wow. Tell me something. You have some things on natural health too, like exercise. I mean, and you have something on yoga. Does yoga keep you healthier? So I'm assuming you kind of believe in that.
Well, so let's look at exercise. So studies have shown that exercise is just as beneficial for depression as Prozac or fluoxetine.
Wow.
But they can't put a patent on exercise, so people
Yeah.
know more about Prozac than exercise. But it's aerobic exercise, not weightlifting exercise. But
Right.
the weightlifting exercise, where that benefit comes in, especially for women, I think, is that it reduces the risk of fracture as you get older. So those weight bearing exercises are strengthening. They're helping you maintain your bone density, because our bone density naturally declines over time, and that's more of a problem for women than for men. So that's the beneficial effect of weight. And and there's simple things you can do. You don't have to go to the gym. You can kind of look up online different exercises you can do to promote your weight bearing strength. But the aerobic exercise, which would be like running, biking, using a bicycle in your home, brisk walking, and it's really any amount. It doesn't have to be 90 minutes a month or a week as we used to think it was. I also went into a lot of detail on other natural things, and I think I kind of shot myself in the foot with what you would call the market for the before you take that pill book, because I kind of pointed out that not all vitamins are as beneficial as you might think, and so the people that were biased, where they didn't want to take prescription medications, got angry at me about what I wrote about vitamins and supplements.
Well, again, I've had some what do you call them, homeopaths, some natural medicine doctors. I've had them on the show. I got another woman from Miami going to be on it next month, and again, they talk to me more about getting to the root cause of figuring out what's ailing you, as opposed to whatever's ailing you and covering it up with a pill. And so it's this balance. But I mean, I believe in Western medicine to a certain extent, but there's a lot of times that there are solutions to not. I don't like being on meds. I mean, I just don't. If I don't have to.
Well, when you brought up yoga, and there's a friend of mine, he's another psychiatrist named Bessel van der Kolk, who wrote it's been a #1 best-selling nonfiction book for 3 years, called "The Body Keeps the Score," and he talks a lot about movement. So about how psychological trauma, it's not only in your brain, but it sort of lodges in your body, and we know that it tends to inhabit your sympathetic nervous system. One of the treatments that we're studying now for PTSD is we stimulate the vagus nerve, which is in your neck, and it blocks the fight or flight response and enhances the parasympathetic response. I think that these sort of movement exercises do similar things. So whether it's yoga or dance, or even drama therapy, that sort of thing, and also breathing, we found that there's a correlation between PTSD symptoms and anxiety and disordered breathing. So, we've been teaching people meditation. We showed that something called mindfulness-based stress training reduces anxiety and PTSD symptoms. And part of that is teaching people about breathing. And it seems that just breathing in a regular way, maybe 6 times per minute, can actually reduce anxiety. And maybe that your brain is sort of perceiving what's going on with your breathing, rather than your brain driving, the breathing to get it regular. But you may notice, like, people, when they're anxious, they'll kind of take deep breaths and maybe, short breaths. But, you may have seen that on Facebook, there's this little device that it has you breathe into the device. And if you breathe in the right way, a green light comes on. And what that does is it's actually promoting you to have a longer expiration. And the expiration period is when the vagus nerve turns on. It turns off the fight or flight response. When you breathe in, the vagus turns off. And so that thing about breathing may actually have a physiological basis to it. In fact, it does, in my opinion.
I wish my ex-wife was listening to you right now. True story. But yeah, that's life. I want to ask you something. Now we're going to get back into the medical, the prescription end of it. If prescription meds don't kill you, they might drive you crazy.
Yeah. So that's about medications that have psychiatric side effects. So there's been a lot of resistance in the medical community to the idea that medications for another physical cause can have a psychiatric side effect, which, if you think about it, if a medication goes into your brain, then you're going to have a risk of a psychiatric side effect. Psychiatric symptoms are in your brain. That's where they come from. And we know that in medicine, we know that the same tissue that creates the brain also creates the skin and creates the gut. It's called endoderm. It's the same type of cell. So any drug that you take for your skin is going to affect your brain and your gut. And that's, in fact, what happens is that, medications like Accutane, which is isotretinoin, they dry out your skin. They treat acne very well. They're very effective. But, and it's 1 or 2% of people can develop depression. And people also develop irritable bowel syndrome and problems with their colon. And it's a big problem. There's been, hundreds of suicides in this country has been identified as a risk by the FDA going back to 2010, sorry, or going back to the year 2000 actually. And there's still people. I get an email every week from some bereaved parent who's had a child that died from suicide. And another big one is Singulair, which is a montelukast. It's an asthma drug, but it binds to the leukotriene receptors, and that's how it works for asthma. But you also have those in the brain, and so they can cause psychiatric side effects as well. The other medications, there's a drug for malaria that was given to all U.S. military troops at one point. They had like 30% of the people that took it had a psychiatric side effect, which is terrible.
Wow. Again, what kills me is, because the pharmaceutical companies are all over the commercials, especially around the news times and things like that. And they talk about how great this drug is, but then at the bottom, it's like may cause blah, 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 dizziness, diarrhea, vomiting, cause probable, death, this and that. And it's like, holy crap. Why would you want to, if you listen to it, it's like there's 40 times, no benefit, the possibilities to the benefit. And so it's like, which leads me, it's like, why do so many people take prescription drugs? Which is one of your chapters.
Yeah, it's crazy. There is a you can, if you people that are interested in the Accutane story, there's a documentary that was done in the Italian part of Switzerland that I was in. It was done about 15 years ago, and I was able to get a hold of it, and it was in Italian without subtitles, so I was able to get a hold of it and produce English subtitles for it. It's my YouTube channel. It's just James Douglas Bremner, or there's another one called Doug Bremner, but it's called Skin to Die For. And they interviewed a man whose son was committed suicide during the clinical trial of Accutane in Switzerland. And then the company just denied that they'd ever heard of him.
Yeah, wonderful. Yeah, there's so much power. There's so, with all that money and all that power, things happen, and they're not going to ruin their reputation. They look at that as just like collateral damage or whatever to get what they want to do. And I hate it. This is the part, the dark side of everything. But one of your chapters, does America have a prescription problem?
Yeah. So with almost half of adult Americans taking some prescription medication, and many people taking medications for side effects, and over 100,000 of people a year dying from medication side effects, including the opioids, which are good. So we do research on opioid use, what we call opioid use disorder now. A good half of those people are people that got started on a prescription opioid after a car accident or an injury, and then become addicted, and the death rate from opioid use is of course very high. So
Sure is.
Yeah.
I don't see that going away. Especially now with the people, people are dying with the so-called accidental deaths. They're going to look for opioids any way they can get it, mixed with fentanyls nowadays. If it's not from a pharmacy, when you're addicted, you're getting it any way you can. And then that topples the problem. And I've seen people just doing pure fentanyl. Just to get that buzz or whatever. And surviving or dying eventually from overdoing it. I mean, it's just a sad state of addiction. But
Yeah,
this is what
I actually carry a naloxone inhaler in my bag, which I think everybody should. They're only like $9.
For the what?
Naloxone it's like an inhaler, and Narcan. It's
Narcan.
an inhaler. Narcan. Yeah.
There you go. Yeah.
It's an inhaler, and it's only like $9. You can just go to the pharmacist and ask them for one.
But
And
I mean,
you squirt it in the nose of someone who's overdosed, and it reverses the
but
opioids.
what a sad state of affair that we are in, to where you have to think about, there's so much of that going on that it's almost like having a flashlight or something in case of emergency. Now, in fact, more important that you're because of the possibilities of so many people on the planet now in the verge of possible ODing. I mean, it's just crazy.
Well, I don't have I don't carry a flashlight, but I do carry Narcan.
Well, okay. So makes my point even more. That's obviously more important to you than some emergency tool in the car or something like that, because of how detrimental it is. I mean, okay, if you can't see in the dark or you have a flat tire, well, that's fixable. Death is kind of unfixable, and that's
and it happens in people in their 20s. So the mortality rate for people that get medication treatment for opioid dependence is like reduced by like 80%, and these are in 20-year-olds. So it's a very high. And the sad thing is that once they go into treatment, if they relapse, their risk of death is even higher, because their brain opioid receptors have reset, so they can't tolerate the same amount of opioids that they took before.
I had a pastor on the show, and he takes care of the homeless over in Baltimore, Maryland. And he, a lot of them are drug addicted and things like that. And he's, rescued a few that were getting ready to clean up, and they go and they OD'd because that before they were going into rehab, they just wanted to get high one more time. And that one more time was the end of the whole deal. It's just sad. It's addiction's a bitch. There's no doubt about it. But I don't know. It's just so saddening, because it's I've done some crazy stuff in my day growing up and lived to tell about it. But I didn't come up in a time where this stuff now, this fentanyl, is just so deadly, and it's so through the country. I mean, it's just readily available everywhere now and cheap.
Well, and the thing is that it's cut with with heroin, so nobody knows what dose they're getting, and it's 10 times more potent than heroin or more.
Well,
so
there you go.
It's the crapshoot.
I'm trying to skip. I'm skipping things, but you got a chapter 69. More bad news about osteoporosis drugs. I mean, my mother had, bad. She was a poster child for all that, and I mean, she was put on Neurontin and all these kind of things, and for her nerves, for her legs, with what do you call that? When your nerves don't work in your leg, neuropathy and all that kind of stuff. Those are all heavy duty drugs. What do they do?
So, did she have diabetes?
No.
Oh, she just developed a neuropathy for.
She wasn't able to walk. I remember saying her legs felt like logs. It came to a point where she couldn't walk anymore because they wouldn't carry her. And they were making her take Neurontin, and I cut them back on it because it was screwing up her brain. It was just, she was changing, and then we cut back and things were better. But that's a heavy nerve drug. I mean, I've heard all kinds of things that has suicidal tendencies and things too. Correct?
Yeah, I mean that there've been reports of people developing suicidal ideation on Neurontin, and Neurontin was really promoted off-label back in 30 years ago for many psychiatric conditions, and the manufacturer of that drug ended up paying them tens of millions of dollars in fines for that. But it's one of these medications that it's working in the brain, so it's sort of working in the brain to affect how you're perceiving your peripheral nerves. And so whenever you give a medication that affects it, we don't know exactly what's going on. I mean, I worked with I worked as an expert witness for drug safety litigation, and one of the lawyers I worked with was Paul Smith, who was the only person to successfully bring a suit against Lilly for suicide and homicide related to Prozac. And he said, when you give a drug like Prozac, it's a serotonin reuptake inhibitor. It boosts the serotonin in the brain. But I mean, you don't really know what's going on. You make the serotonin go up, you make it go down. If you make it go up too fast, in my opinion, if you stop those medications too quickly, or you increase the dose too quickly, in my opinion, they can cause transient suicidal ideation. But it's true. I mean, we don't really know exactly what, what's going on. And for some people there's benefit, and others there's not.
Everybody's different.
Everybody's different.
But the osteoporosis, bone density and things like that, there's some heavy drugs that are used for that, right?
Yeah. So what they were doing is they were created these bone mineral density tests, and they were screening, all women over the age of 50. And, so you screen for heart disease, you screen for this or that. It sounds good on the face of it, but basically they were saying that, a quarter of women over a certain age had a disease, which was osteopenia or osteoporosis. And then the disease implied that you should take a medication for it. Those are the bisphosphonates, which are drugs like Fosamax, and they were being heavily promoted. So Sally Fields, the actress, was going on TV and in magazines promoting those drugs. And what they do is they decrease the breaking down of bone, but they're kind of, normally there's osteoclasts and osteoblasts. They build up bone, and then the other side kind of breaks down bone. So they're blocking the breaking down. But what would happen is that would keep your bone mineral density from declining for about 5 years. But then after 5 years, they stopped working, and your bones would become more brittle. So they were getting these findings that women after 5 years are having more breakage of bones, and no longer getting benefit. So it was again another medication that was overhyped. And I think the alternative would be the weight training exercises.
Double-edged sword.
Yeah.
I think that this book, with its clever title, is a great. I think I consider it like a quick reference guide. I mean, to steering you, getting more understanding to a lot of the things that are in people's lives, daily. And this book's available on Amazon. Where you get them?
It's on Amazon right now. That one for the ebook there's a sale for 99 cents. And
how can you deny that?
Yeah, and they're both on Amazon right now.
But so the difference, because I want to get touch on this. So this, to me, when I saw this book, and then this one came out. How long ago did this one come out? Not too long ago, right?
Yeah. So that one just came out a couple of months ago.
Right.
So they were just a few months apart.
They seem like brother and sister. I mean, or they're kind of similar. Am I wrong? Or tell me what the difference. I mean, I know it's a series of books, but does this get into more of the politics of the whole deal? But it seems like you're still talking a lot about the same subject matter.
It's the same subject matter. It's just that they were sort of different time periods. So the first one, the Pimps, Whores, and Sugars, was sort of when I was first writing Before You Take That Pill came out, and then the Psychiatry Wars one is during a period when they were writing something called the DSM-5. It's the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual. And it's sort of it's the Bible of psychiatry. It's how they make psychiatric diagnoses. It's how insurance companies, pay for psychiatric visits. So I try and be funny, and entertaining. And so sometimes I was sort of making fun of the whole process of coming up with psychiatric diagnoses. Many of my colleagues didn't have the same sense of humor, but
Yeah.
I was just sort of highlighting how, I was just writing about different psychiatric diagnoses, and there's controversy in the academic field about some things, like, dissociative disorders, multiple personality disorder. That would be an example.
Yeah.
Gender dysphoria disorder. That is you could argue it's a diagnosis that the doctors sort of came up with as a way to pay for gender transformation surgery. But is that something that, is a real disorder, is my question.
You have 81 chapters in this book, which is, again, kind of like topics and just each chapter is very, specific. The biggest part is you signed my books, and I love that. Thank you. I do. Both of them are signed. In fact, you even signed the ones from 2 years ago. But there's, again, it gets a little more, to me, it gets a little more um, into the how do I want to put it? Okay, some, about the physicians who care. I mean, some people want to do their job and not able to. I mean, do you find that's getting more and more nowadays because of the politics?
Well, I started to write more and more about healthcare politics because I thought it was interesting. And when I went back and looked at it, a lot of the stuff that started out with Hillary Clinton trying to, reform healthcare, and then Obamacare. And those issues have not gone away because there's never really been a fundamental change in, in the healthcare system. So, our country is unique compared to other countries around the world in that it's really a for-profit based system. Countries like Italy, where my wife is from, there's a primary system of healthcare that's managed by the government, and they do have private, there are private doctors, but everybody basically has access to healthcare. And what Obama did is he basically took the old system and tried to make it so that more people could get access to the system, but there's no real fundamental change in the system. And so a lot of the issues that come with that, we're still dealing with. So that's a lot of the same topics. I had one critic say that, well, you criticize the fact that insurance companies are taking advantage of Medicare Part D, but that was back in the Bush era. But, I went and looked up the topic, and there's still issues with insurance companies taking advantage of Medicare Part D. Nothing has really changed.
Again, it's been, I think since I was a child, there's been nothing but problems with, I mean, it's the same discussion year after year, and then the promises being made that, we're going to fix this, we're going to do that. And, there goes another 10 years, boom. And they're still talking about it because people quickly forget and complain, when they hear it or when it's affecting them. But, we just keep putting up with it.
Yeah. And the most common cause of bankruptcy in America is healthcare. There's a healthcare disaster, and people, can't afford their hospital bill, and they declare bankruptcy. That's the number one cause of bankruptcy in America, as my friend Patch Adams points out. He's the doctor that the Robin Williams movie was made about his life, and he's an advocate for what we call consumer rights. So we would say, that someone who's a consumer of healthcare, we advocate for them in that we want to promote their ability to get access to healthcare. We want to empower them to learn more about the medications they take and learn more about their own health, so that they don't have to be dependent on doctors. I mean, there's nothing wrong with doctors per se, but I think people should take charge of their own healthcare, whether it's mental health or medications. So when I write about medications, I try and educate people about their prescription medications with the non-biased view of the positives and the negatives. And for mental health care, I advocate for people to take charge of their own mental health recovery and learn tools for recovery from psychological trauma. That was the book that I wrote called You Can't Just Snap Out of It. It's a self-help book, basically, that teaches people how to do things like, deep breathing and meditation and guided imagery and stuff like that they can use to help them recover. And I give it to all my patients, and some of them say, well, doc, the medication didn't help much, but the book did.
Well, knowledge, again, if you don't know, you don't know. We as patients, you go to the doctor. I mean, I remember, again, when they were giving all these shots for the recent, incident that we had, pandemic we had. And my friend said, well, don't you trust your doctor? Because he was all for it. And I just wasn't. And that was just my thing. And I said, I do, but I don't, things have changed. I question everything. And just, you walk into a doctor. I mean, you're not living with the guy. It's like they see you, the pressure they put on you. You have 10 minutes to see a patient, or something like that. And they go through it. They're going through their notes and this and that. And I times are changing. And I don't know, because you actually even have it in here. It's one of your things about doctors being pimps, the whole thing. They're getting what do you call it? They're incentivized for pushing certain medications and things like that, correct?
Yeah, I mean, the biggest issue would be in the so doctors work sort of like apprentices. So it's like a carpenter. If you want to become a carpenter, you go spend time with another master carpenter. He shows you how to do it. And in medicine, we say see one, do one, teach one. So you're sort of watching someone put in an IV line, or you're watching someone do a procedure, and then you do it yourself underneath supervision. And so what happens is, once the doctors go out into the world, when they want to get updates on what's the latest findings in medicine, they go to these medical conferences where they go back and they listen to the doctor who trained them, who's the professor like I am, and they give them a lecture on what's the latest on medication. And then they go prescribe the medications that were recommended by that doctor. But the thing is that those doctors that are the leading academic doctors, the drug companies know that they have a lot of influence. So they hire them as consultants, or they hire them as to give lectures, and some of them are making as much as $500,000 a year, and so they become incentivized to sort of be more biased towards the medication that's from the company and they present the positives and downplay the negatives. There's something called the Sunshine Act that Charles Grassley introduced. It was about 10 years ago, where they required drug companies to publish the payments they made to these academic doctors, and that really changed the landscape quite a bit. That was about 10 years ago. Yeah.
I just see, to me, I just feel like some doctors are getting lazy nowadays due to the pressure they're under. The pharmaceutical rep rolls in, and they're pretty much dictating to the doctor. I mean, they're taking the pharmaceutical rep's word as to what they should be using and how they should be using it. I mean, I'm not saying all. There's a lot of doctors that are doing their homework, but it's tough being a doctor. And they're just, it's like they're not learning from the above. They're learning from the bottom up.
Yeah, and they also, there's something called free samples. So they'll give a free sample, and then the doctor will give that to a patient that doesn't have any money. But then once they get on the medication, that they're used to it, if it's helping them, or sometimes there's side effects of just getting off of medications, and so it's like they're hooked, and now they're they have to continue. They have to pay for this expensive medication. That's usually something on patent, which means it's going to cost way more than something that's off patent.
I want to start getting into the psychiatric part of your career, but these are kind of towards the end chapters. ADHD drugs not better than psychotherapy after 3 years. What does that mean?
Well, that was a trial that was done of randomizing kids with ADD to medication versus specific behavioral therapy, and the point of that is that there are these specific behavioral therapies you can inquire about, and they involve training not only the kids but also training the parents. So this is something that's sort of more of a new development, where parents can take specific classes that will teach them behavioral techniques that they can use to help their kids that are struggling with school. And it's an alternative to medication only approach.
Gotcha. And last thing because I want to move on to something else with you. Before you see that psychotherapist, what does that mean?
Well, what I say is that not all psychotherapists are necessarily going to be good. And I saw one study, like maybe up to a quarter of people in psychotherapy will have some side effects, and sometimes people get worse before they get better. So what I tell people is, I work at the VA. I'm primarily medication, because the VA can't afford to have psychiatrists doing a lot of, intensive psychotherapy. And I spend a lot of my time doing research, but I usually tell my patients, if they want to get into therapy, go interview. It's just like anything, go interview 3 people. You don't just have to go to the first person that's on a list and then just start up with them, and then find the one that you feel most comfortable with. Because one of the studies has shown that the best predictor of good outcome from psychotherapy is whether the client likes the therapist and feels comfortable with them, and whether they're a good fit. And that's more important than what style of therapy they're doing, or there's different types of therapy. cognitive behavioral therapy or psychodynamic therapy, etc. Most important is that you feel comfortable with that therapist, and that's what's going to help you recover.
I've said it a million times, and I'll say it a million and one. There's good and bad everything, or good and not as good everything. And I've seen people that were like therapists and this and that, and their lives were crazier than the people they were taking care of. And again, you get all kinds, but then you got the great ones. But how do you know until you know? And that's hard, because at $150 and up an hour, which either insurances are paying or you're paying, and it's a tough one when you're seeking help. Trust. It's all about trust.
Well, there's some things that are just obvious, so if they're eating their lunch while they're talking to you, or if they fall asleep during a session, or, if they show up late, I mean, for psychiatry, sometimes I'm a few minutes late because we kind of have one person after the other. But for psychotherapy, I think it's really important that, the therapist starts and ends on time, something we call the frame of therapy. It's sort of like a holding space that makes you feel secure, because it's very difficult to talk about, private things, with someone that you had known before, and to, make yourself vulnerable. So, you need to have a good person for that. I've consulted on cases where there are therapists that they cross boundaries, that, had relationships with patients and whatnot, and lost their license for that.
Right.
It's a serious deal. That's very damaging when that sort of thing happens.
Yeah. Well, all I can tell you is that, again, the time I've spent with both these books, worth the buy, worth the information, especially if it's on sale, the audiobook for 99 cents to listen to it at least. But I like the book. I'm a hard guy to read. My focus drifts very easily, but I kept on because there was you call it a chapter, but they're really, there's small pieces, in my opinion, of pertinent information, distinctive information for so many things. And I know it would appeal to a lot of people, because a lot of people are going through it and have these problems and need to know. But I like it. But I want to talk about you as a psychotherapist and psychiatric therapist. Tell us a little bit about what you do at the VA, and because you just touched on it, but I mean, what is your most common issues that you're dealing with over there?
Right. So I like I said, I do research on PTSD, and some of my research studies are in the VA. And so we're trying to develop new treatments. And my clinical work is in psychiatry, and probably half of my patients have PTSD. They're all veterans. From all the wars, Vietnam, Iraq, Afghanistan. And then some people will develop PTSD from, maybe training accidents during the time they were in the service. And so most of them, I also have patients with schizophrenia, with chronic depression. And for a lot of them, it's, they're having long-term mental health issues. Sometimes people will develop a crisis, maybe there's a legal crisis or something that occurs, and I try and help them out. I give them advice, and try and give them, sometimes I'll see veterans with their wives or with their kids, and sometimes that's helpful to just sort of explain to the family members like what's going on with their spouse in a way that maybe they couldn't do as easily themselves. And so and then I prescribe medications. I usually, I have a big poster of my "Before You Take That Pill" book, so I'll point to the poster and say, I'm not a drug pusher. I'm not profiting from getting you on medication or anything. But sometimes the people have severe depression, something like that, then I do recommend medication. In the past, I think minor depression was being overtreated, which has led to some of these findings of the questionable efficacy of antidepressants. But I think when you get into more severe depression, you're more likely to show benefit.
When you say PTSD, to me, in my mind, again, knock on wood, that like I don't have what these people go through. It seems like such a broad picture of what goes through and the effects and what it does to people. Is it really different with everybody, or does it have a pattern?
Well, so we have what I would call stress-related trauma spectrum disorders is the term that I wrote about in my first book, Distress Damage to Brain. So there's this idea that stress can lead to specific psychiatric disorders. So that would be more like things like PTSD, dissociative disorders, substance use disorders, and then things like schizophrenia. Is not as clear. We know that about half of women, for example, that have depression, about half of them it's related to early childhood trauma. So early trauma, is really, which affects maybe up to 10-15% of people, is really a key driver of a lot of these. But not everybody develops PTSD. Some people develop depression. Some people develop something called borderline personality disorder, and it still may be linked to things in their childhood. And then we know that there's an over 10-fold increased risk of using injected drugs, namely heroin, if you have a history of 3 or more childhood traumatic events. So it's a spectrum of disorders that if you look at people who meet the criteria for PTSD, whether it's from combat or from rape or a train wreck or car accident, they do look similar. Like the symptoms are similar. The only differentiation I would say would be that when people have early trauma, they tend to get more complex PTSD. So they have the core diagnosis of PTSD, but then have other associated symptoms like depression or dissociation.
I just don't know what that all entails. And to me, and when you say, childhood trauma, you're looking at a 60-year-old person that says, well, you don't know what my childhood was like. And I'm thinking in my head, it's not that I don't I don't understand, because I but I try to understand, but yet there's a part of me that says that was 50 something years ago. Get over it. I mean, but it's not that simple, I guess.
Yeah, well, it's not simple because it really is a brain-based disorder, and you can't really think your way out of a brain-based disorder. In the early part of trauma, the early after exposure to a trauma, I think there is a way to sort of modify the outcome. So like I use the example sometimes of there's a house on fire across the street from my house late at night. And I went over there and I tried to save the woman that was in the house and failed. And after that, the next day I was having these sort of intrusive memories and kind of auditory, hallucinations or whatever you want to call it of things that had happened the day before. And I thought, gee whiz, I look like someone that's developing PTSD. What am I going to do about it? So I focused on kind of exposing, going back and looking at the scene of the fire, recreating what had happened in a more of a rational way rather than the sort of distorted memory that I had during that stressful period. And I tried to talk about it, with my wife, and I tried to sort of re-expose myself so that I could sort of get back into a groove. And I think a lot of people after a traumatic event, they try and block it out, and that's probably not the right approach. But once it becomes chronic, in about 30% of people, it just after 3 or 4 years, most of those people they'll have symptoms for the rest of their life, and then it's just more a question of sort of managing them.
Yeah. See, I'm not trying to be cold-hearted or anything. It's just hard to me. It's like you're letting something that was so long ago continue to destroy you on the inside. And to me nowadays, I mean, it seems like we're pampering. We have so many children that they've been so pampered that they just don't want to be adults and things like that. And now we got all these new, the common sense of things about growing up. My parents grew up through World War I and World War II when you had to walk 40 miles to get wheat, in German-occupied Greece and things like that. And, talk about hard times and growing up. I mean, I wouldn't want to see anybody go through that kind of stuff anymore, but it made them adults. I mean, you know what I mean? It's not like I don't want to get a job. I don't want to get a driver's license. You just drive, that kind of stuff. And everybody's got issues nowadays. And so, I know you're dealing with serious things, but I just don't know how you get to the root to it. And if you're having an effect. Real quick, she wrote a comment a while ago. I don't know if you could see this or not, but what's your opinion on EMDR therapy for PTSD? What is EMDR?
It's called eye movement desensitization retraining. It's there's studies showing that it's effective. I think all the effective treatments for PTSD share in common that they allow you to go back and re-experience the traumatic event in a way that you don't get overwhelmed with anxiety. So what EMDR does and other similar treatments do is they create a way in which people can go back and discuss the traumatic event with the therapist and doing some kind of technique to reduce anxiety at the time that they're talking about the traumatic event.
All right. Well, she wrote that comment a while ago, but I wasn't able to get to this point so I hope she's still there to hear what you had to say about it. Again, I just trying to differentiate the people who start claiming, issues as opposed to the people who are seriously in trouble, because I just feel like we're getting so much more of everything nowadays. And, and you have to be in the middle of it.
Well, I think that people that really are having severe PTSD, you're probably not hearing from them.
You're probably right.
People you're referring to are probably not true PTSD.
I mean, nowadays everybody's got something. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I never saw so much ADHD in children. When I was bouncing off the walls, my old man got the belt out, and all of a sudden my ADHD just went out the door. I was cured. I mean, he didn't beat me to death, but I mean, it's just different nowadays. Does that make any sense?
Yeah, I think that I think we may see more in social media people, and there's even the thing of like people using depression as an adjective or a metaphor, like I'm depressed or I'm traumatized, and these are not necessarily people that are really clinically depressed or traumatized.
Wow. Well, look, and again, how do you feel? This is the last question, because unfortunately we can keep on going, but I can't. All the work you're doing with some of the, your more serious patients and things like that, do you really feel that you're making a difference? I mean, that it's keeping them alive and sane, or is it a battle of just like, it's a tight wire act?
Some people, I've seen some people that will improve enough to where they'll before maybe they weren't able to work, they are now working and pursuing careers and moving forward in life. For some people, it's for some the disorder is chronic, and they we're just sort of trying to maintain and avoid crises, or try and keep the support in their lives, usually the wives. Maybe if I can explain things to the wives and sort of help them be a support, and try and keep that connection going. So it's different for everyone, but I would say the majority of the people that I work with, they have chronic mental illness, and they're not going to have a complete recovery. So that's not necessarily the goal.
Right. Okay. So that's severe stuff. I just didn't know, and again, the loss. What do you think the ratio is of, like, the ones that go into self-destruct mode, that no matter you tried, but they just took things they just kept going down and down? I mean, how tight are your hands for you to be able to be doing your job?
Well, I tell people that I've never had one of my active patients complete suicide, and I don't want you to be the first. Some of my patients have severe chronic suicidal ideation, and they're sort of hanging in there by a thread based on the fact that they have children usually, or other family members. I usually try to emphasize to people that, you may think that people would be better off without you, but in my experience, that's not the case at all. That it has a profound effect on people when someone takes their own life, and that's something that you should consider.
Yeah. Mostly, what's the percentage men, women?
Well, the disorders like PTSD and depression are twice as common in women as in men.
Really?
PTSD is twice as common in women as in men. Completed suicide, of course, is more common in men, because they tend to be more aggressive and have more access to firearms. Your risk of killing yourself if you have a gun in your house is like 8-fold increase, and the reason why is people will do something like that on an impulse, and if they didn't have a firearm, that wouldn't happen. So if a lot of the veterans have firearms, we usually try and get them to put it in a safe or store it somewhere else.
Sleeping pills too. I mean, I've known many men that have taken their own lives just sitting in a car and going to sleep.
You mean by overdosing on purpose?
Yeah.
That's. I mean, people will overdose as well with medication.
And you're telling me that twice as many women have PTSD. I was thinking you're going to tell me men overall.
No, so like PTSD is more common in non-veterans than veterans. So veterans are not the majority of people in this country with PTSD.
Wow.
The most common cause for women is childhood sexual abuse.
Another problem. Again, it's just there's just some really horrific things that that nobody should have to go through. But yet here we are. All right, look. I highly recommend anybody interested in these books to go on Amazon. And plus, on top of it, where can people find you? I mean, you're all over all the platforms, right? You're on Facebooks and Instagrams and all that, correct?
Yeah. So, like on Instagram, it's James Douglas Bremner. I also wrote and directed a movie that's on Amazon and Tubi, and you can find that just by looking for my name, and Plex and Roku, etc. And on Instagram, it's James Douglas Bremner, and then drdougbremner.com is my website, so you can find all my social media and stuff on there. And I'm on Twitter as Doug_Bremner, and there's a Doug Bremner writer page on Facebook, and then I also have a Facebook page for the movie and for a couple of the books.
Wow. Well, I think that the books you're absolutely right. They're not a hard read. They're something that anybody can, understand, and that's for sure. So, and these are all on Amazon and where else? I mean, that's pretty much the go-to nowadays, correct? Amazon.
Right now, since they just came out, they're on Amazon, but I'll be putting them up on like Barnes and Noble and Apple Books and stuff in the future. Kobo.
Well, you did a good job when you said that you're going to make it something for people to understand, because a lot of people, it's like if it starts getting way too deep, then they're going I'm not understanding half of this. Plain English right here, plain English. Even I could understand it. So good job. I want to thank you for staying up late, taking the time to come on the show. You were great the last time you were on, but now I told that was with you and your sister doing that true crime book, and tonight it was all about you because you bring a lot to the table. So Dr. Bremner, I appreciate your attendance tonight, and I'm pretty sure that all the viewers in the future and present will down the road.
All right, Peter, it was great. Thanks for having me.
No, it's my pleasure. So again, anybody wants to find you, you're on all the platforms from LinkedIn to Facebooks to YouTubes to Twitter to X, all of those, correct?
Everything, yep. And then my website's drdougbremner.com.
Simple enough, drdougbremner.com. All right, listen, thank you. We'll be in touch down the road because you're a writing machine. You have a lot of books, and this is part of your series, so it sounds like book 2 of a series. So how many more are you planning to put out in this genre?
2 more.
2 more. All right. Yeah. Well, I guess you'll be back.
Yeah. Okay.
All right. Thank you again. Wave goodbye to everybody. And again, I appreciate your time and your knowledge more than anything. I promise you that. Well, I promise me that I know that just the conversation we have helps a lot of people down the road. So doing a great job. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, Peter.
All right. See you. Right here, folks. You find these on Amazon. Doug Bremner, writer, psychiatrist, researcher, drug safety advocate. What more can you want? And he's honest, truthful. He's telling you like it is. Some drugs you need, some drugs are just all about the money. I want to thank everybody for tuning in. I want to remind you, next week, real quick, where are we? March 20th, Wednesday, coming up. Tim Kramer, founder of Mosaic Advertising, and he's a conservative show host of the podcast Kramer Says. He's a no holding back kind of guy, and he's going to be on this show. And again, there's going to be people that are going to love him and people are going to hate him, just like they do me. But so long as you pay attention and take it to heart, you don't have to agree, but it's just good to know, to hear a bunch of different things and versions, so you're a little more knowledgeable. Instead, take the blinders off, because we are so divided. I'm trying to make sense of all this, but he's a plethora of information. I want him on this show, and again, he's a no holds back kind of guy. We're just going to lay it down and take it or leave it, but I don't want you to miss it. So again, buckle up. Just saying. Wednesday, March 20th, coming up. Kramer Says, Tim Kramer, podcast show host, conservative show host, and founder of the Mosaic Advertising. So you're not going to want to miss it. I want to thank everybody for tuning in, watching Life of Peter G, the Peter G Show, right here every Wednesday, like clockwork, 6 p.m. Pacific, 8 p.m. Central, 9 p.m. on the East Coast. God willing. Everybody needs a little help. I definitely do. And again, life's a bitch. I talk about it all the time. I will forever be talking about it. You don't have to be an ass if you're going through some problems, but try to be kind. But you don't have to take a lot of crap from people either. Life is short. But just get through it, because life is definitely worth living, and I love life, and I love you for tuning into this show. So we'll see you next week, and thank you for watching. Share, subscribe. We're going to fight the system. One person at a time. We're getting there. I love you for it. My name's Peter G. That's my name. You're watching Life of Peter G, the Peter G Show, and I will see you next week, right? We'll come before you know it. As always, I love you guys, and peace out.
Peter G Show, Peter G Show, divorced and single.